Today's video shows how a 72-year-old beekeeper earned $68,000 with his bees. A powerful story. Don't skip. Watch till the end.
His name is Henry. He lives in California's Central Valley, where winter is barely noticeable. In January, daytime temperatures usually stay around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 to 16 degrees Celsius, and at night they rarely drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. Rainfall is short and irregular, the soil dries quickly, and by February the almond trees begin to bloom. At that time, the perfectly aligned rows of orchards turn into a continuous white and pink landscape stretching for miles along roads and irrigation canals. In a normal year, the air during these weeks is filled with a constant hum. Bees fly from sunrise to sunset, and you can hear them before you even reach the trees. But in recent years, that hum has become noticeably quieter. Sometimes it is almost gone, and Henry notices it immediately. California produces more than 80% of the world's almonds, and without bees, this entire system simply stops working. Proper pollination requires an average of 2 beehives per acre. Most almond farms cover 500 to 800 acres, while larger ones exceed 1,000. That means a single grower needs anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 hives for the bloom season, which lasts only 3 to 4 weeks. While the flowers are open every year, more than 2 million hives are brought into the state. They are transported by truck at night, so the bees don't overheat. Many colonies arrive already weakened, and it is here in the orchards that the real losses become visible. In recent years, seasonal mortality has risen to 30 to 40%, and in some areas it has reached 45%. Henry had 46 hives. He never chased volume. His apiary had stayed in the same place for over 20 years, next to orchards where farmers tried to follow treatment schedules carefully and gave advance notice. Henry knew every colony and remembered when and where queens had been replaced. Every morning he started with a walk through the apiary. He watched how many bees came out to the entrances, checked the frames, counted brood. Henry wrote everything down in an old notebook: dates, weather, temperatures, observations. By late February, when daytime temperatures were around 62 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees Celsius, he began to notice that some bees simply were not coming back. The hives were working, but more slowly than usual. Near the entrances, dozens of dead bees appeared, not in massive numbers, but consistently. At the same time, farmers were already talking about higher prices for hives that season. Pollination fees had risen to $200 to $230 per hive, and strong colonies were being booked in advance. Those whose bees survived the season with minimal losses would be able to choose better contracts. The rest would take whatever was available. One day, closer to midday, when the temperature had climbed to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, Henry was walking between rows of almond trees. The wind came in gusts, sometimes sharp, sometimes easing off. Bees were flying low, often losing direction, landing on branches or on the ground to wait it out. Henry stopped by one of the rows and simply watched. In moments like these, an experienced beekeeper sees more than it might seem. He doesn't look at how many bees there are, but at how they move, their speed, flight height, and whether they return carrying pollen. That's when he noticed one bee. It was flying straight into the wind, steady without sharp movements, as if the wind didn't affect it at all. It was visibly larger than the others and moved with confidence. While other bees pressed themselves to the ground, this one kept flying. Henry stepped closer and extended his hand. Holding a bee by the stinger is a technique known only to those who have worked with bees for years. He gently held it between his fingers and almost immediately realized it was a queen. The queen was not inside a hive, but out in the field, during active bloom and chemical treatments, and yet she looked completely healthy. He didn't take risks or experiment on the spot. Henry returned to the apiary and placed the queen in a separate box. Over the following days, he observed her closely. Egg laying was steady, 1,800 to 2,000 eggs per day, without gaps. The larvae developed evenly, with no signs of failure or deformities. The bees around her worked calmly and actively even during warmer hours when temperatures reached 77 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius. Henry didn't draw conclusions out loud and didn't tell anyone. He simply recorded the data and compared it with other colonies. In the notebook, a short note appeared: strong queen, stable behavior, continue observation. At that moment, Henry did not yet know that this single bee would become the beginning of a season that would bring him the highest income of his life. By early spring, daytime temperatures in the Central Valley stabilized around 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 to 24 degrees Celsius. The almond bloom was coming to an end. Petals covered the ground beneath the trees, and the intense movement of bees slowly faded. For most beekeepers, this period was the most uncomfortable part of the year, the time when losses became impossible to ignore. Colonies were opened one by one, frames were pulled, brood patterns were checked carefully, weak hives were marked, combined, or written off entirely. Many beekeepers already knew they had lost between 25 and 30% of their colonies even before summer began. Henry worked alone and without hurry. He compared each hive to his notes, flipping back through pages filled with dates, temperatures, and short remarks. The difference between the colonies became clear quickly. The hives descended from the isolated queen developed evenly. Brood patterns were dense and continuous, with very few empty cells. The queens laid consistently, and worker populations grew without sudden drops. By May, Henry had 12 new colonies derived from that single queen line. He deliberately did not push them into heavy work, no long-distance moves, no stress. He focused on balance, enough foraging, enough rest, steady growth. When daytime temperatures climbed above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees Celsius, those colonies adjusted their activity naturally, reducing flight during peak heat and resuming later in the day. Mortality remained under 10%, a number Henry rarely saw in recent years. Nearby beekeepers were already talking about losses closer to 25 to 30%, some even higher. Henry didn't comment. He simply kept recording the data. By late spring, conversations among beekeepers shifted to prices for full colonies. A strong, healthy colony was now valued between $4,500 and $5,000, depending on strength and disease resistance. Henry wrote the numbers down but made no decisions. He wanted to see how the colonies handled the coming heat. By early summer, temperatures regularly crossed 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius. This was the period when many colonies broke down completely. Nectar flows slowed. Water became critical. Weak hives collapsed fast if they couldn't regulate heat. Henry checked his apiary daily. He watched how bees ventilated the entrances, how quickly they resumed work in the evening once temperatures dropped. The colonies from the new line behaved differently. They conserved energy. They didn't panic. Activity slowed during the hottest hours and picked up again after sunset. The first call came quietly. A farmer Henry had worked with before mentioned that nearly 40% of his contracted hives had failed during the almond season. He asked if Henry would have anything available for next year. Henry said he had a few colonies, but nothing large scale. They agreed on 5 colonies at $4,800 each. Within days, another farmer called, then another. Word traveled without advertising. In agricultural communities, numbers speak faster than promises. By July, Henry had firm commitments for 11 full colonies, all with deposits paid. He also rented out 8 hives for late season pollination work at $350 to $400 per hive, higher than average rates justified by survival and stability. Henry turned down additional requests. He didn't add equipment. He didn't hire help. He had seen too many beekeepers lose everything by expanding too quickly after one good season. By October, daytime temperatures eased back to 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 to 24 degrees Celsius. The pace of work slowed. Feeding schedules were set. Winter preparations began. Evenings grew quieter. One night, Henry sat at his kitchen table with the same notebook he had carried for decades. He went through the season line by line, checking numbers twice. There was no excitement in the process, only habit. The totals were clear. 11 colonies sold at an average price of $4,800. 8 hives rented for premium pollination work, several smaller services and local jobs. Total revenue came to just over $68,000. Expenses, feed, woodenware, fuel, maintenance added up to approximately $14,000. That left around $54,000 net for the year. At 72 years old, Henry didn't celebrate. He closed the notebook and put it back on the shelf. For him, the season wasn't about money. It was about paying attention, about noticing small differences, about not ignoring a single bee flying against the wind in a California almond orchard. That was enough